Do you want to build a career in IT by learning how to code, but you are full of self doubts because you have spent many years in a different industry? Today's video is going to be very inspirational for you. We are talking with Zubin, who spent 12 years as a lawyer in his professional career. At the age of 37, he started learning how to code, and within 2 years, he got a job at Google as a software engineer. Zubin also runs an awesome YouTube channel where he puts content that can help you make this transition. The link of that channel is in video description below, so make sure you subscribe to it. And let's get started and learn from Zubin's journey. All right, Zubin, thanks for spending time for this conversation today.
Pleasure, Dhaval. Thank you for having me on the channel. Yeah.
So, what do you do at Google right now? Just talk about the team that you work with, some of the programming languages and tools that you use at Google.
Sure. I mean, Google's a very large company, as everyone knows, and even the engineering teams can be quite big. So I'm now part of the Chrome OS team, the Chrome operating system team, which is, most of it is open source stuff available for the public to look at. And this is not really the browser bit so much, though it is sort of related to that. This is more about the operating system for Chromebooks and other devices. So it's a really interesting space because obviously it's a different way of trying to approach the web. And in that space, I'm in the engineering productivity team. I write a lot of Golang code, and other internal sort of tools that I use. And my role is really to ensure that we write automations and other frameworks and things that assist other developers in being productive, that improves the performance in our CI/CD, and so on and so forth. So it's quite an interesting space. I'm relatively new to this team. I was in Google Cloud before this, but that's what I do right now.
Nice. Golang, I heard, is becoming very, very popular. So I'm glad that you're working in that language. Let's discuss about your past, your education, your career as a lawyer, and what sparked the idea of making a career in coding.
Right. Well, this is a long story, but I'll try and make it short. Okay. So I had never actually intended to take on a career in coding. What happened was, I grew up in the 90s in India, and I went to law school there in Bangalore. And then, this was 98 when I entered law school, 2003. It was a 5-year program I finished. And Dhaval, you'll remember the entire world changed in that period, right? I mean, Google came out of a Stanford Research Lab sort of thing in 98 or whatever it was, and then by 2003 2004 got listed. In between that period there was the dot-com boom, the dot-com crash. So back then the internet was still a relatively unknown quantity, and I was on a very traditional path to be a lawyer and all that. So I started that way, and then I was a lawyer in India for a while, then moved to Australia where I'm based now. And in that entire period, the more senior I got at the law and the better I got at it, the more I realized I really enjoyed the people. It's intellectually very challenging, but I wanted to do more. I was very curious. Come 2007, 2008, that global financial crisis happened, and it was a very difficult time for people around the world. I'm sure if you were in the US at that point in time, I'm sure you would have had a challenging time too. And so I was in a situation where I was thinking, gosh, I'm going to hold on to my job. Am I not going to hold on to my job? But I also realized by that point in time, as much as I enjoyed being a lawyer, I really was quite interested in the business side of things, especially technology and business. And from then on, 2009, 10 onwards, my interest in tech started, but my interest in business also started to grow. And so I went on this long journey of trying to change out of the law, which is quite hard. That was my first career change, to try and change out of the law. Eventually did that 2014, 2015. By this time, I'd hired a bunch of developers overseas, including in India and stuff, to build little apps that I thought may become my startup. And to be honest, I knew so little that almost all the code that I ever paid for and got is still sitting in zip files on my computer and my hard disk at home, because I didn't even know how to deploy them. Like, I didn't know anything. I knew nothing about technology, but I started to feel really left out. I was starting to feel like there's been a decade of momentum with this incredibly exciting, creative space. And it wasn't just that it was lucrative, it was actually exciting. All the fun people seemed to be there. I honestly felt like, I was standing on the shore, and this cruise ship filled with really fun people who were having a party and enjoy themselves as, sort of floating away from me. So, it was a very difficult time, because I'm like, I should be grateful for this career and success I've had, and I was doing quite well, and being paid quite well and all that. I'm like, why do I want to be on that boat? And why does it feel like that distance between me and that cruise ship is expanding every day? So all that was going through my mind. Anyway, I ended up just quite yeah, I ended up moving into the business side of the company I was in. So I went from a law firm to a company as a lawyer. Then from within the company, after many years of trying, I found a role that was not legal. And that was my first step. In the meanwhile, I tried to teach myself to code 2 or 3 times and gave up during that period because it was just too hard and I didn't know what I was doing. In hindsight, it was my lack of a plan, which I didn't know how to have. And then eventually, in fact, a few days after I got married, I called up my wife at work and I said, listen, we need to talk. And, I'm going to quit my job, right? And I just want to do something else.
5 days after marriage, that's courageous.
It was very courageous. It was also, kudos to my wife. She was very stable about it. And she said, okay, good. Well, this is what you always wanted for a long time. Just go out and do it, But I was kind of nervous. I'm like, maybe I should have said this before the actual wedding. But anyway, so that's what happened. And so we left. So I left the company I was in and I started this tech company. I was non-technical. I had no idea what I was doing. I sank a lot of my savings into building up the product and, getting several thousand users on it over the next few years. It was a parking application. And then I finally found someone after great difficulty to become my tech co-founder, but then he left after 6 months for personal family reasons. And I was left, there with these proof of concept contracts that I had to deliver on and not being technical and all that. And then I just said, well, I've had enough. I'm so tired. It's so hard to find a technical co-founder for a non-technical person. I said, I'm just going to learn to code. Like for a decade now, I was sitting on the fence, watching the cruise liner drift away and thinking, I'll never be part of this. And so I said, I've had enough. I've left my job. The worst has happened. Rather than going back, I'm just going to keep going forward in this direction, right? And so I did that. I taught myself to code. It wasn't easy. I learned from my mistakes. This was my 4th attempt. And the goal was, and I wrote a blog about this on Free Code Camp, the goal of this was to become my own technical co-founder. That was my goal. If I ever started another company again, I don't want to be at someone else's mercy, right? That's how it started. I did that. And 5-6 months later, I was like, okay, I'm getting comfortable with the idea of code now. It was mainly front end and a little bit of back end. And I was like, okay, I'm getting some sort of web development skill here. What am I going to do with this now? I don't really have a business idea yet. So I said, okay, the best thing for me to do is to try and get paid to learn, which means I, get good enough to get a job. Even if it's a junior developer, I'm rebooting my career from the ground up. Like I was 37 when I taught myself to code. 38, I got my first job and I got all 4 offers that I applied for. And to be honest, that's not because I was particularly great. It's because I've hired and been hired. I've been both the candidate and the hiring side in 3 industries in 4 countries, right? So I have experiences that has nothing to do with just engineering. That's just how the labor marketplace works. So I leveraged all that knowledge, got all 4 offers, chose one, and got my first start as a web developer, a full stack web developer here in Australia. And a year later, I decided, okay, I'm going to go for Australia. Beg your pardon, I'm going to go for Google because my wife and I thought, this is pre-pandemic. Let's go to California and see what that's like. And then I got into Google, about a year after that. And that's where I've been ever since for the last little over a year, almost a year and a half now. So that's the full story. It was never intentional to be a career coder. And to be honest, I probably will go back to startup, either my own or, try and co-found something at some point in time. I'm really interested in that. But I do enjoy the process of being a developer. It's extremely creative. It's challenging. But, I'm finally on the party board. It took me a long time to swim and close that gap, and it was hard, but I'm finally on it,
You're on the cruise. Finally. Cruise boat.
Yeah, finally.
Nice. Well, congratulations on your success.
Thanks,
so, so it's quite interesting, right? Like 37, you start learning coding, and you must have faced a lot of social pressure, I believe. Other than social pressure, I think a lot of self-doubts as well, correct? So how did you deal with all of that?
Look, I'll answer the social pressure one. Really, there are 2 categories of social pressure that people end up caring about, and myself included. One is people who love you, who like, what are you doing? You're crazy. And then there's others also, people who love you, like, we support you, we love you, we'll get behind you, but you're crazy. So either way, most people are like, you're crazy. And then there's all the other pressure, which is not so much from people that you love, but just, anytime you have a career and you're leaving it, especially if you've been successful in it, everybody else will just look at you funny, or even if they don't, even if they're actually looking at you admiringly, you perceive that as some sort of judgment on their part, and you feel smaller. I was 37. A lot of my colleagues by that time, were high income earning, lawyers, sort of executive type people. And I'd given up that life to do this. And I'd gone back to no income for my startup for 2.5 years. And then when I was a junior web developer, my income was like 30% of what I was earning before that, so a lot of it was my own psychology, to be honest. But looking back, I realized I was the big problem there. Most people, while they thought I was crazy and they wouldn't want to do it, somewhere they also kind of admired the fact that, I was going for what I wanted and I was taking risks. And now, of course, everyone's like, this is amazing what you've done. But really, I honestly, genuinely believe anyone can do it. The big obstacle is, as you mentioned, self-doubt. And on the self-doubt part, Dhaval, I don't know. I think anybody who's basically interested in learning will never get rid of self-doubt. Because what happens is the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know and how much there is to know, right? It's people who are totally confident about themselves with no reservations and no sense of imposter syndrome. They're usually people who don't really know how much there is to know, you know. And I think if you're a curious learner, you'll always have that self-doubt about, my God, am I ever going to be able to know what I need to know? But the good thing is you learn faster than you realize. And over time, you learn to live with the self-doubt. It's like having a shadow. You stop paying attention to it so much.
Got it. And other than self-doubts, what were the problems that you faced during this career transition?
Yeah, specifically about the learning to code, or you mean about the general career transition itself?
General, including learning to code.
Including learning. Okay, I'll start with the learning to code stuff because I think a lot of people feel this. I think a lot of people, and just last night I was having a coaching conversation with someone about this. I think a lot of people will think that if it's hard, that means it's either I'm not smart enough or the resource I'm using is not good enough, as opposed to it's just hard. And there's a certain amount of spade work and digging that you have to do to get to the breakthrough anyway, So that was definitely a mistake I fell into. I either discounted myself or disqualified myself or thought I just wasn't smart enough because, there's all this mythology around coding, right? Or you have to be a math genius, you have to be some sort of, nerding genius or whatever it is. It's not really true. There are people like that, but a lot of people can be really good coders by being regular people. It's not like that.
Yeah. I think it's a big misconception. Math you need if you are machine learning engineer or some specific role. But I think 90%, 95% of software engineers, you don't need to be smart in math.
Right. And I think because of that, a lot of people discount themselves, and as you said, you may need it for specific roles. And I would argue even then it's learnable. Like after joining Google, I had to learn a bunch of new skills. I'm still learning a bunch of new skills that I never would have had to learn outside a company of this size or scale, right? And had I thought, gosh, I don't know that, how can I even try? People expect you to learn on the job. And especially in this field, whether you're doing it professionally or not, things move so fast. There's always a new exciting technology to work with. And there's always a learning curve, which I personally love, right? Because I think any other role, you'll end up stagnating, but less so in this. So I think this thing about, these myths that make us discount ourselves, that was one obstacle I faced. The other obstacle I faced is I'd constantly switch because I didn't know which resource was right for me. And I always assumed if I was having difficulty, it's the resource or my problem. Never that some things are hard, like I mentioned. So that was the second thing I realized I was doing wrong. The third thing I did was, which was very difficult for me, was, you don't know where to start. You don't know how much is enough. You don't really have a path to your goal. You just know you want to become a coder. But the thing is, it's not like walking. When you see a child learning to walk, one moment it's not walking, the next moment it's walking. And it's clear. There's a line between not walking and walking. I don't know if there's a line between becoming a coder and not being a coder. Like it's very clear when someone cannot code, but at what point do you say I've become a coder? There's no clear line. You know what I mean? And so I always set that goalpost beyond where it was necessary. And so I never felt like I was reaching it. So that was another mistake I made. And finally, on the coding side, not understanding that everybody has an opinion. And everybody's opinion is based on their life choices. And therefore, they will fight really hard to defend that opinion and tell you you're wrong, which is a human nature thing. That caused a lot of confusion in me because anytime I made a choice, there were 100 people telling me it was a rubbish choice. And 100 people telling me it was the correct choice for me. That's really confusing and overwhelming. And because of this free information that we have on the internet, we have a tendency of assuming that the abundance of information is an asset. I truly believe free information is an asset, no question about it. But having that level of abundant information without real strict guidelines about what you can and cannot ignore is a recipe for being overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed and confused. And that's how I spent 4 years of trying to learn to code, right? Like there were 4 attempts. It was my fourth attempt that I succeeded. And the fourth attempt, once I figured out my blueprint, it took me a little over 5.5, maybe 6 months to get to my first role, right? So I really think it's possible for people to do it if they're working full-time within a year with real discipline. You can totally do it. But the trick is to know that you have to ignore most of the nonsense advice out there. So that's on the coding side. And on the career change side, most people will tell you it's possible, and you can do it, especially if you're speaking to professional colleagues about I'd like to join your team, but I don't have direct experience. Most people will say, yeah, you're smart, you can do it, and all the rest of that. But when it actually comes time to giving you the role, they may not do it, right? And this is a number of reasons. One is HR may have rules about it. There's candidates in the market that are less risky. And this is why I say that career change is less about the subject matter sometimes and more about understanding how the market works. And so you have to work to de-risk yourself as a candidate. You have to work to understand that given role, what problem the hiring manager is facing, and how you can be the best solution for it on the day, right? And really, Dhaval, I know people, especially in the knowledge working space, we love to think that we are the cause of the successful outcomes. I got in because I was smart, I did this because I was capable, because I worked hard. All of these things are necessary, but they're not sufficient. There's a little bit of magic in life, right? There's a little bit of magic, and that's a little bit of luck. On the day you interview for the role, you got lucky that other candidates weren't better than you that day. For that day, not that they're better people, not that they're better coders. We don't know any of that. Those are useless comparisons. On the day, and we know this in athletics. Like there were times when Sachin Tendulkar had a bad day,
Yes.
There were times when Michael Jordan had a bad day, when other people beat these people,
Yes.
But we don't deny their ability. And that's exactly what getting a job, career change, no matter which field you're in, there's a little bit of luck and magic in life. And so being hardworking and smart is necessary, but not sufficient. But a lot of people assume it's sufficient and then get disappointed when life gets in the way or they had a bit of bad luck. I mean, you think about it, any interview is statistically set up for failure. Everybody except one is going to lose.
Yes.
Right? It's simple stats, no matter how good you are.
And well, I agree with all your points. And I know many cricket matches where Sachin Tendulkar got out on a first ball, right? Doesn't mean he's a bad player.
Unskilled player. Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about the problems that you face, do you think if you had a good mentor that would have helped?
That's actually what resulted in my breakthrough at the end. So it was a combination of mentorship. It was a combination of mentorship, persistence, and getting the right guidance and clarity on my goals, right? So I'll give you an example. The first time I tried to learn to code, I wanted to do an Android app. I went straight into the Android framework, not even knowing the difference between a framework and a language, not even knowing what an IDE was, not even knowing what compiling code meant. So having a mentor will really help, because a good mentor will tell you that's not where you start. In fact, what is your goal, right? So another example of one of the students I was coaching, you'll appreciate that I will give you a background, was 2 months into learning Python and she abandoned it, right? To go and start learning C, because everyone told her, yeah, but you're really not. She wanted to be a data scientist and machine learning engineer. That was her path, right? She was clear on that goal, which is good. But she ended up giving up on Python 2 months in. She was so close to making that breakthrough. She gave up on it and switched to C, because everyone is telling her to be a really serious computer science sort of person, or taken really seriously, you have to know C because that's what Python's implemented in, this and that, right? And it sounded persuasive because everybody wants to be the best. Everyone wants to try and be excellent at what they do. And she gave it up, went into C, found it really complicated. In some senses, it set her back, not just time-wise, but psychologically. It cost her about 2 to 3 months. And I told her, I said, in that time, had you persisted with Python, you'd have got your certifications and you would have possibly been ready for your first role. You could have picked up C later once you had the confidence, So I think that's actually quite definitely what happens very often is, we, without the right mentorship and guidance, we make choices based on incomplete information. We just don't have the map to make the navigation. And so we do the best we can. you know. We do the best we can, but often, direction is more important than speed, right? So even if I take the best
Hmm.
judgment and I go in the wrong direction, if I want to go from Bombay to Calcutta, but I head west, I will not get there.
Hmm. Exactly. And it has become very important in today's age where there are so many e-learning websites, so many blogs, so many boot camps. If you want to learn Python, there are million places you can learn
Million.
Python from. So more choices, more confusion. So if
Much more
anyone,
confusion.
so much
Much.
confusion. So if someone who is listening to this conversation right now wants to make a transition, make sure you get a good mentor. And it's not hard to find one. LinkedIn, internet, you will find so many good mentors and just follow the direction, have patience. It's like, I want to build muscles and I just go to one gym for 1 week, then
Right.
another gym for 1 week and don't have a
Exactly.
patience. It doesn't work like that.
Exactly. No, that's 100. That's a great example. To switch gyms, it doesn't work. And the other thing, I really want people in the channel to remember this: the risk is not that you won't be able to learn it, or you're not smart enough, or that it's too hard. The risk is that you will make it inadvertently, without meaning to, you will make it so hard for yourself that you'll give up. Your real risk is giving up, not that the
Hmm.
subject is hard.
Right.
So anything you can do to compress the time frame to learning, while at the same time not having too many distractions pull you and confuse you, is not really making you better at learning directly, but indirectly it's reducing your risk of giving up, therefore making you better at learning.
Exactly. I think that's the most important thing that you mentioned. And the girl that you talked about, right? When a person goes from Python to C, you're setting up yourself for a failure because
Yeah,
C is
totally.
much harder compared to
Much harder.
Python.
Correct. And not necessary for the goal. Why would we do it just because it's nice to have when our goal doesn't require it yet? It's so much more important to get paid to learn the harder goals. Like, put your goals smaller, make it more achievable. Once you're in the industry, you can learn many more things on top of that. You'll have the confidence, you'll have the support. All of that will come to you.
Yep, you said it very right. You need to plan things such a way that you can reduce the probability of you giving up. I think that's
Giving
the
up.
most
That's the
important thing.
biggest risk.
All right, so just to revise your own career journey, you were a lawyer for 12 years. You
Mhm.
started these companies, you were involved with some startups in tech industry. That's how you kind of got involved into this beautiful world, of coding and technology companies and so on. And then you started learning coding. So you didn't go from lawyer to software engineer at Google, but it was like a step by step transition. And it was not
Yeah,
something you aim for, but there's a saying that life is what happens when you are busy planning other
making
things,
plans. So true.
right? So that's what happened with you. All right, so let's go back a little bit into your own journey and discuss about your interview process at Google. So how was the interview process? And most importantly, what was the feedback from your family and friends when you got an offer from Google?
Right. So the interview process, Dhaval, is quite public. It's well known. Basically, it is you apply, you get phone screen, and then a technical interview on the phone, and then you have your on site, so your interview. Now, I had started interviewing for Amazon and Google and Snap and all these other companies in the US around the same time between January and March. And if you remember, this is 2020, right? And so if you remember, COVID had started, but no one really knew what it was all about. And so by March, it was very clear that none of the interviews were going to be on site. They were all starting to be virtual anyway. And so that's how it happened. And that was quite hard because, some of them are in strange time zones and all the rest of that. And especially the more technical, algorithms and data structures interviews where, you have 45 minutes to 1 hour and you're doing it online and you can hear them breathing on the mic and things like that. Like, they make it very comfortable. All of them do. So that was the Google interview process as well. It was several hours back to back. And it was, challenging, like you'd expect. But I'd prepared, and I also knew, Dhaval, as you and I have talked about this, that there comes a certain point in your life when you're not too attached to the outcome. because you realize there's a bit of magic in this as well, So I done my best. I was happy with it. Whether I got in or not, everything was going to be a bonus. But the very fact that I got that far was good enough for me for all these companies, considering I was self-taught. So that was the interview process. When I got it, and I had a couple of offers, and I was, for me, Google was always going to be the clear winner because I've had such a long fascination for and respect for the company. For me, it was a great company and an opportunity. At first, people are like, so, you're going back to the law. Or because I had an MBA, the default thing is, oh, great, so is it a product role or what? I'm like, no, it's an engineering role. And they're like writing code. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, but didn't you just start writing code? I'm like, no, it's been, a year and a half or 2 years or something, So there was this confusion. And then people are like, how is that possible? And I'm like, it's possible. Other people have done it. Why not me? There's no difference. We're all human beings. So that was that. To be honest, that was a moment I'm slightly ashamed to say it, but I was actually secretly quite kicked. I was quite vindicated by that because a lot of the doubting people are like, hang on, what? That's possible. So that was great. It felt good. I'll be honest. It felt good.
And you mentioned that many people have done this. So in your life, have you come across people from a different background who have switched to coding career?
Yeah, because I think what ends up happening is once you do it, suddenly you encounter more people like that. They reach out, or in my case, when I wrote that blog on Free Code Camp, a lot of people just reached out on the back of that, saying, hey, I used to be a lawyer too, even in Melbourne, and I've gone into the development world. There's one other ex-lawyer at Google who's a software engineer, but he went via the bootcamp route, and so you meet people from, I've met people from investment banking. In fact, I know now, just directly myself, in the last year, I've met 16 people around the world, 16, who are ex-lawyers turned coders, right? So once it becomes more normalized in that sense, people come out, they self-identify and say, hey, I'm also from a non-traditional background. And slowly you realize that it's much more prevalent and possible than you realize. It's not easy, but the world's a big place and it's possible.
Right. Because my friend's wife goes for one of such boot camp here in Delaware State in US. And she has a class of, I think, 20 to 30 people. And everyone is from a very different background. There are people who are chefs, like chefs, like cooking. And such a diverse background. And after finishing that boot camp, everyone got a job. So every one of them are working as a programmer. So programming is not like being a doctor. So if you want to become a doctor, you have to go to a lab, you have to dissect human body. You can't do it at your home. But programming is, the entry barrier is very less. You need internet, laptop, all the resources are there available for free. Yeah.
And the big thing with these practices, Dhaval, is, because I was a lawyer, you have to be admitted. So, when I moved to Australia as a lawyer, I had to requalify in some senses, get re-licensed and admitted, right? And you have to maintain that every year. The same thing in India, US, whatever it is. In the US, it's even more difficult because every state has its own bar association. So same thing in medicine and accounting, right? So these are gated professions. They have a central body that tells you whether you can practice or not. So they're gated, and so you need licenses and formal degrees and all that. But most of the world's professions don't require that. They're not gated in that sense, and especially engineering, which I think is truly background blind. It's funny. So 5 years ago, I remember asking people I think it was a Twitter survey somewhere else, do you think computer science as a background is really, really important? And a lot of people, I think 40% of people said yes. Recently, I did one again on a Google Sheets for my communities. I have a very small community, a few hundred people. And only 1%, I think, said they thought it was still important. In 5 years, that shift has happened. The people are starting to realize that having a formal computer science background, while useful, is not necessary or sufficient anywhere. And you can pick that up. So, slowly people are realizing that having a non-traditional background, it's not the background that's the challenge. It's being able to learn in a way that's able to efficiently get you to your goal. So it's really not the background. People tend to think it's the background. It's a challenge for getting your first job because you have no industry experience. That's true. But Learning to code doesn't care about your background because everybody had to start from zero. Everybody, without exception.
Got it. And while listening to this conversation, I know what people would be thinking who are listening, especially if the people are listening from some of the Asian countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Because I get this question a lot that, okay, things are very different in developed nations such as US, Australia. So it's easy to make that career transition. But if you're in India, let's say, it's not easy. But I want to tell to those folks that in India also things are changing very, very fast. India is evolving rapidly. I know every country has their own mindset, culture, people think differently, but that trend is changing very rapidly. So nowadays, doesn't matter if you're in US or Australia or India, you can make that career transition, and it is possible. You need to have that faith, because if you go and seek the social approval from your friends and relatives, you will only get disappointment. Okay, so don't look for
Correct.
that social approval. Just have that faith and a hope, and
Correct.
you will and you said it right. Like, once you get some success, all of a sudden you find so many people who have already walked the talk.
A lot of the people who, said, yeah, I think you can do it, and yeah, sure, try, but you could see the doubt in their eyes. A lot of them will come to you and say, I had no doubt you could do it. Of course you can do it. Especially
Dude,
aunties and uncles and stuff will say that, right? So
aunties, uncles are worse. Like, my brother is a computer engineer. He started his own business, okay? Everyone filled him with so much doubts. Everyone was telling me, no, you're not doing the right thing, because he started this software training business, and it was like 4 or 5 years. He was not making any money. He got
right,
married, which makes things worse. And people were like,
right,
oh, look at this guy. He got married. He's not even earning bread and butter. He's relying on his father. And
right.
everyone just tortured him left and right.
That's really
Now,
hard. Yeah.
now my brother is successful. He's having a software company. 60 people work in his company. He's growing very rapidly. And the same
Right.
people are coming to him, and they you know what they're telling? Oh, Bhavin, we knew you will be successful because you are
Huh.
good in communication. You are so smart and all that.
Suddenly
And
they'll
my
find the reason.
my brother was talking to me. See, look at these jokers. The world is full of clowns. They make a happy face, they make like a crying face. They just change in every second. So
That's so true. That is true. Can
it's
I ask, Dhaval, so your brother's business, how long has it been now since he started it?
so he started. Actually, it's been 6 to 7 years. I think 7 years now. So he
Right.
ran a training institute for 3 years. Then he realized, okay, he should be building a software development company. So he shut
Right.
down the whole training institute. He's one of those people, who is a risk taker, who can go against what the society is saying. But not everyone is
Right.
that courageous. So he
No.
built the software training business. He worked hard for 3 years, and he took the business to a level where the business was profitable. And now he's shutting down the whole business. And again, he faces a lot of social pressure, because everyone is
Of
like,
course.
are you fool? Like, you have a running business and you're shutting
Yeah.
it down. You're doing just totally new thing, and you're not sure whether you will be
Right.
successful. Some people
Why
also
don't you just
advise,
continue what you're doing? Right.
yeah, some
Totally.
people advise either continue doing that or don't shut it down, do the other thing in parallel, and when the other thing stabilizes, shut down this business. But he was more like, no, I'm confident the other thing will work, and if I want to focus on that, I need to shut down this thing, which is consuming a lot of my time. So then he started this company called Atlic Technologies in 2017. That company grows very fast. Like 4 years, he has 60 people. He's hiring 50 more people. Can you believe it? Like 100. He's
That's
gonna be
unbelievable.
110
Like
people.
doubling.
He's
You're
doubling
almost
right now,
doubling. Wow.
and
Unbelievable.
everyone comes to him. The same people comes to him. Bhavin, you are you are very genius. We knew you will be very successful. So if anyone is listening to
Yeah.
this conversation, the world is full of clowns. Like, if
Totally.
it's so it's up to you whom you want to listen to.
Totally.
All right.
And you know what, Dhaval, just on that point, like I think there's a big lesson in your brother's journey, right? First, he had to overcome self-doubt. even if he's a natural risk taker, nobody is immune from doubt, fear. And usually courage is manifested only in the face of fear. Like if you're not afraid, there's no courage, like there's no need for it, right? So
Right.
to have courage, you need to be facing fear. You need to be feeling fear.
Hmm.
Then you overcome the doubt. Then you overcome the social resistance. Then most people will tell you at some party or dinner or breakfast or whatever, oh, you're crazy. Why are you doing this? You shouldn't be doing this. And they'll go away and they'll forget about your life. Right?
Hmm.
They're not thinking about you. You are living in either the joy or the hell of where you are. You're either in heaven or hell on these journeys.
Hmm.
One of the two positions, right? And you have to live with that every minute of every day for years,
Hmm.
with no success for the first few years. Then you get some success.
Hmm.
Then you have to, then he realizes that I want to actually, there's actually another opportunity here. And this is the important part, I think, in this whole story of your brother, is he realized that he couldn't do two things at the same time and do them well.
Hmm.
He had to make a choice of where to put his focus, right? And this is so important. I hope everyone in your channel hears this. There are so many distractions. There are so many shiny new technologies. There are so many opportunities that are going to try and compete for your attention. When you're in a down place, they will all look incredibly easy, sweet, attractive, and guaranteed. But
Hmm.
this is the only thing that's guaranteed. If you switch once, you will make a habit of switching, and then you will spend time on the other thing and realize that is also hard. It's got its own set of challenges. You'll keep moving between stools and never sit on any of them, right?
Yep.
And then you will spend 3 years not having done anything, feeling bad about yourself, learning a little bit of everything, but not enough to be good at anything. And that's when you will give up. It's much better to be really good at one thing than to be really bad at many things and give up. Stack one on top of the other, you know. So I think your brother's journey there is a direct metaphor for almost anything in life, but definitely in the coding journey. Like so many people get distracted. Should I do React or Vue? Should I do Django? Should I do Cloud? When you're learning, learn the fundamentals. They're more or less the same regardless of which language. My
Yeah.
first language was JavaScript. It took me 2.5, 3 months to get comfortable with it. My second language was, I mean, whether it's considered a language or not, it was different TypeScript, but it had a whole different set of rules. That took me 2 weeks. And I was able to pick up the basics and get effective and productive in Golang in 1 week.
Wow.
Not because I'm not great at Golang, just to be clear. I was able to get productive.
Hmm.
The reason is I had solid foundations in one language.
Hmm.
Even if it wasn't a strongly, whatever, you can get into the technical stuff, right? The 80% of what you need to know is common across all of them. So you're better off focusing on one that is quick for you to eat and easy and something that you can actually be productive with. Everything else gets easier after that. You know, switching focus, very dangerous, very, very dangerous. And it becomes a habit.
Totally agree. Now, if someone wants to make a career transition, like how you did, what are the first three steps that you advise that that person should take?
Right. So the first three steps is, let me give an example of, let's say you want to buy an ice cream.
Hmm.
It's the same problem solving process.
Hmm.
First, you have to decide, it's not just I want ice cream. You have to sort of know what kind of flavor you like, or
Hmm.
at least what flavors you don't like. So to draw that back to the career change thing, it's not really enough to say I want to change my career, because at that point in time, the only information you have is I don't want to do this career. So
Hmm.
you've eliminated one, right? Hopefully. And then now you have to choose something else. Now,
Hmm.
let's take coding. If you want to switch to coding, there are so many different types of coding, and you don't have to become a professional software engineer, right? You don't even have to become a professional developer front end. You can be a data science person, and we can get into the differences of all these things. Or you can be technical enough to be quality assurance or product management, anything that's your first step, that's directionally where you want to go.
Hmm.
So you choose the flavor you want that you think is interesting enough and exciting enough for you that will keep you motivated on the down days, because most of the days will be down days.
Hmm.
Right? So you choose your flavor. Then you choose, okay, how much do I really want it? Because I have to pay a price. If you want, if you don't have the time or the patience or the grit to pay that price, you will damage your self-esteem by trying for something you're not serious about.
Hmm.
You will. So that's the second thing, is you decide how much do I want, and if the price of this is it takes me 2 years, I'm going to do it.
Hmm.
Right? So that's the second thing, you decide the price. And the third thing is you ask people who've had ice cream before where you get the best one. Do not ask people who've never eaten ice cream, which ice cream should I have? It makes no sense, right? So that means if you're looking for a career change, not only do you need to speak to the people who are already doing the kind of thing you want to do, you also need to try and find people who've changed career. They're two very different skills. So I may
I
go to a
know.
computer science, right? I may go to a software engineer who's never changed career, and they will quite rationally tell me, "You're crazy. Don't change your career after 10 years or 15 years."
Hmm.
Because maybe they don't like their career, they hate being an IT, and they're going to tell you it's horrible, it's so boring, and all the rest of it, and you're a career changer, you're crazy. That's possible. Go to an IT person and say, what is it like to do this job that you're doing? Tell me what the content of the role is, so you understand, right? Because most people confuse the company for the job. And I keep saying this, I've said this on Twitter and LinkedIn. What you do every day is much more important for your mental well-being than who pays you to do it. The job is much more important than the company that you're doing it for. So, do the due diligence in the kind of job you want. Then the other thing is the career change aspect. The only people who will tell you it's possible are people who've done it.
Yes.
So if you want to change careers, speak to people who've changed careers. And if you want to get into IT, speak to people who've changed careers, and then have a separate bucket of people who are in IT. If you can find someone who's done both, even better.
Yes.
But if you can't find people who've done both, separate the buckets out. Don't mix up the two. Because you'll get different kinds of information from different people. And that's the third ingredient, right? Is only ask for ice cream recommendations from people who've eaten ice cream at the shop you want to buy it from.
I like your ice cream analogy.
It's common sense when you think about it for small things like that. But in big career decisions we confuse the problem solving process.
So that goes into basically picking up your mentor. So you don't just pick any mentor, but a mentor who has done that transition, who is also who has a lot of empathy and who is compassionate, who wants to help people. Right. So choosing mentor, like you need to be very careful. Otherwise people will put all kind of negativity in your head, and
Absolutely.
it's not gonna be helpful.
It's, the point of negativity, that was really good. Someone asked me once, if you had never seen a sheep before, and I told you a sheep is a vicious animal that will kill you, the first time you see a sheep, you'll be a little bit scared of it, right?
Yeah.
His point was, we take people so literally when they give us advice. We have to ask ourselves, do they really know what they're talking about?
Yes.
Because if somebody tells you a sheep is a dangerous, vicious animal, it'll rip your throat out, it's just not true.
Yes.
But we take it at face value because we've never seen a sheep before.
Right. All right. So for going back to the question, so if the person wants to make a transition, maybe I can add my own thoughts here. So first is choosing a mentor. Of course, if the world is like full of information, you want to determine the path. And by the way, I also make some videos on this front. So if you want to become a data analyst, data scientist, what is the direction you should take? What are the courses you should do in a step-by-step manner? So I have those videos. So you can go find those videos on YouTube. Find a right mentor like Zubin, for example. He has done this career transition, and we're going to provide his LinkedIn as well. You can connect with him, or any other person, who has made this transition. And the third thing is, which is what we mentioned during the beginning of the conversation, is you need to have patience. Things are not going to happen magically. It's not like you will become Python expert in first month. Learning programming requires a little bit of mindset shift. So if you've never done coding, and when you start doing it for the first time, it will sound alien almost, and you have to adjust to that, and it will take time. You will have to go through a lot of frustration, but do not give up. Basically, give enough time. 6 months, 1 year. I think you agree, right? Like that should be the path 100%. That person should take.
And on the thing about time, that also, because so many people tend to switch courses, like, obviously, your material, I mean, how I even met you is because your material is very accessible. And I think everybody should find one or two people who they are able to learn from. Everyone's learning style is different. Find people that you're able to learn from, and then after that, stop switching. Just commit to finishing everything that person has to offer. Don't switch, because every time you switch, you'll just go backwards. It's like snakes and ladders. And on this time thing, I think people make the mistake of saying, I'm going, it says, like, I bought a book on JavaScript learn Java in 24 hours, right? But basically, it's a textbook that's designed where every chapter is meant to be read once in 1 hour. So technically, that's right. 24 hours, you've read the book, right? But it took me much longer per chapter. And I didn't know Java at the end of 40 hours or whatever it is. I had to actually practice it, right? So don't fall into this trap of it's going to take me this many number of days. Instead, assume that if you do 2 hours a day, it's probably going to take you about 6 months to get comfortable, 1 year to get good. But you have to do 2 hours a day consistently. Consistency is way more important than the number of days totally. You have to be super consistent. It's going to take people longer than they expect, longer than they hope. But the breakthrough will come, and when it comes, you will never be the same again. Your life will never be the same again.
Now you have a YouTube channel. You try to help people, especially who are trying to make this career transition, right? So just talk about your channel a little bit, like what is your mission and what kind of videos do you have, or what kind of videos you're planning to produce?
Sure. So, I mean, it's a very crowded space. I never really thought I was going to have a YouTube channel or anything. But what happened was when I wrote that article on Free Code Camp about my career transition, I'd said I'll give free, half an hour coaching to people. And I thought maybe 10, 15 people will sign up. Within about 48 hours, 536 people signed up, right? And so I was completely overwhelmed by it. So I did about 80 in the last 3 months. But what I started to realize is there was a common pattern that was coming. And the pattern was really around, wasn't so much about coding per se, it was about the journey of becoming or learning to code. Do I do boot camps or not, and all that. So there were these meta questions that were really confusing people. And so I said, okay, there are plenty of places where you can learn Python or JavaScript or C or Java, whatever it is. There are plenty of places. There's no shortage of that. But in terms of actually giving you a map of mental models to break down the problem for your journey, specifically for you, the language is almost a tool or a tactic. Different jobs will require different languages or frameworks. So, you have to learn these things. But how you go about it, what are the pros and cons? What is your expectation level in terms of time and effort? And most importantly, I want to be very transparent about self-doubt, imposter syndrome, how hard it can be, how many failures there were along the way. Because, it's easy to watch the social network and say, oh, Mark Zuckerberg hacked it in a weekend. We don't know, if that's actually what happened, right? And I've never been able to hack anything particularly meaningful in a weekend. But maybe that's a reflection on my skill. But, a month, I've been able to do good things, right? So we tend to underestimate how much, or we tend to overestimate what we can do in 1 week and underestimate what we can do in 1 year. So we have to play the long game. So that kind of stuff is what I talk about in my channel. And it was really double a way for me to address the questions of those 500 plus people. And then it became 700 in a few days after that. Because I couldn't give them all one-on-one time, I could see the common questions emerging. And I said, all these common questions, I'll start producing videos on them. So that way I don't have to have one time with them. They'll get the benefit of the video. So that's how it started.
Nice. You're doing amazing work. So continue doing this amazing work. And thank you very much for spending time today for this talk. We're going to provide all the links, Zubin's channel, LinkedIn, everything in the video description below. And if you are planning to make a career transition, we both wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thanks, Dhaval, for the opportunity. Thanks very much. And also, it's because of people like you that I was able to make the change. So thanks to people like you, it's possible for people like me. And I think that's something everyone should remember, that, it's possible that in 1 year, you may be either speaking to someone like Dhaval or interviewing somebody else, whatever it is, it's possible for you, because of people like Dhaval. So don't forget.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for all the kind words. All right. Bye.